1,000 years ago, Canadians were Native Americans, and 300 years ago, we were settlers. But today, there is not one definition to articulate what it means to be Canadian. My name is Kristy-Lynn. I come from a family background of being Métis, Ukrainian, Irish, and English, and today I want to talk to you about defining Canadian culture and what exactly it means to be Canadian. I think that this topic is an important one because to me, Canadian culture could mean something very different than it does to you. And that's what I love about Canada. We are like a collage. It is our mosaic that defines us. In order to even attempt to define our cultural identity, one must explore the traditions and histories of many different cultures because it is our multiculturalism that makes us so unique in comparison to other countries. Sure, there are cliches about us because we say A, we play a lot of hockey, we are fueled by Tim Hortons coffees, and we apologize too much. But when Joe from Canada was late for hockey the other day, he rushed into Tim Hortons to grab a double-double and someone bumped into him and he apologized to them. Was there really an issue? He was just being polite. Seriously though, I think Kim Campbell, Canada's first female Prime Minister, once said it best. Our Canada is an inclusive country built by English and French-speaking Canadians together with our Aboriginal peoples who were here first and the millions who have come since from every corner of the world. And they still come. 1 million people a year make inquiries about coming to Canada, and we welcome them still. We need their ability, we need their entrepreneurial spirit, we need their academic excellence, we need to be reminded by their love of country, of our love of country. When I first started researching this topic, I knew that in terms of history, I should include the original arrival of settlers to Canada and the events that followed. After all, if the settlers and the natives did not end up together, then none of us would be here today. However, when I started researching the settlement history of Canada, I realized that this is something that most of us have already learned about in Canadian history classes, and I wanted to make this more personal because, like I said, my idea of important aspects of Canada's cultural identity can be entirely different than yours. So, I would like to spend a moment now to talk to you about the place that I have called home for 19 years, Washburn Island on Lake Scugog. Although it is not an island anymore, at one point in time it was a booming getaway place for tourists from the city, and dating back as early as the 1600s, there were campsites on Washburn Island for the Mississauga natives. In 1804, Washburn Island was a big part of what some people believe to be one of the most devastating events in the early 19th century, the sinking of Speedy. Speedy was a boat that was on its way to Newcastle for a murder trial when it faced a terrible storm which caused it to sink on October 7, 1804. Now let me rewind a bit. In 1804, there was a busy trading post on Washburn Island that was looked after by a man named John Sharp. However, it is said that John Sharp was responsible for killing a native man named Whistling Duck when they had a dispute over a trade. Whistling Duck's brother then killed John Sharp in order to gain revenge. Following this murder, the prisoner, members of the court, the lawyers, and the witnesses were all aboard Speedy, heading to the trial when the boat sank and they were all killed. Following the accident, an investigation revealed that there had been a series of scandals in provincial administration and its attitude towards First Nations peoples. This corruption reached up to the highest levels of Canadian government, and the consequences of this tragedy can still be found in many areas of Ontario life. If this event had never happened, then there would not have been an investigation into the cause, and the flaws in our government system may not have been discovered so soon. This event was one of the first legal incidents and possibly the first ever murder trial set to be held in the area. Although this is not a nationwide example of the struggles faced by the natives and the settlers in the early days of Canadian civilization, this example works for me because it took place so close to my home. It wasn't until the early 1900s that summer cottages appeared on Washburn Island, and in 1901 someone discovered the bones of John Sharp. I can walk end to end on Washburn Island in 15 minutes, and it's crazy to think that such a significant event happened in such a small place. Also, here's another interesting fact for you. It is believed that one of the first 3 cottages on Washburn Island belonged to the family of Billy Bishop, the World War I ace. Last month, I took a visit to the Canadian War Museum, and the exhibits involving Billy Bishop really stuck out to me because I thought it was so cool that he and I shared a love for Washburn Island. I challenge you to look into the history of your own neighborhood because perhaps you could find an example to learn from like I have too. Like I mentioned earlier, it is Canada's multiculturalism that makes us so unique. Today, over 20% of the Canadian population is composed of immigrants, and we have the highest percentage of foreign-born citizens than any other G8 country. Stats Canada indicates that the majority of our immigrants reside in Ontario, BC, Quebec, and Alberta, and most of them are in our larger cities. In a national household survey in 2011, it was revealed that there are over 200 ethnic organizations in Canada, and 13 of them have a population of over 1 million. So how did we get to this point? Immigration Canada dates back as far as the 17th century when the British and French colonization began. Immigration continued through the 18th and 19th centuries with a boom following each of the world wars. With these new cultures came the need for new policies and laws to protect the diversity of our nation. It was in 1971 that we became the first country to enact an official multiculturalism policy, and it was under the government of Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 1982 that Canada implemented a Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protected multiculturalism. In 1988, the Canadian Multiculturalism Act was introduced, and this is when ethnic groups began to receive federal funds in order to help preserve their cultures and traditions. In the future, the diversity of our population is expected to continue expanding. Stats Canada predicts that by 2031, 25 to 28% of the population will be born in a foreign country, and 29 to 32% will belong to visible minority groups. With all of this information in mind, can you see why I think that it's hard to define Canadian cultural identity? The facts that I just stated make it clear that to be Canadian is to feel at home, no matter what color you are, what language you speak, or what religion you do or do not believe in. In Canada, the heritage of our neighbor can be a reason for celebration, and while we may all come from different backgrounds, not any one of us is more Canadian than the next. Canada is a country that takes pride in the diversity of our people. Kim Campbell also once said, "Canada is the homeland of equality, justice, and tolerance." It is here that the meshing of two great cultures, further enriched by the contributions of our Aboriginal fellow citizens and the millions of men and women who have come from every continent, has allowed us to create one of the most prosperous and most dynamic societies in the world. My Canada is the fact that our population density is only 3.8 people per square kilometer, one of the lowest in the world. It's also the fact that our 31,752 freshwater lakes make up 9% of the world's freshwater supply. I love Canada because my dad, my dog, and I all have matching lumber jackets, and people like them. My Canada is freedom. Here in Canada, we're allowed to be opinionated. My Canada is the 2-hour commute that I make to my cottage every weekend. It seems to be different every time, because in Canada, we experience 4 seasons. Even though sometimes it seems like our seasons are warm, cool, cold, and colder, I wouldn't want it any other way. My Canada is the fact that I study in our nation's capital and I get to visit a new cultural institution almost every week and I never stop learning. For lunch today, I could have had Chinese food in Chinatown or pasta in Little Italy. The possibilities are endless. I love Canada because growing up, I was a hockey player and a figure skater because I just couldn't pick one. My Canada is a collage. What's yours? 1,000 years. I stuttered. New York, unique New York.